Hello everyone, my name's Jumpscare and today we're going to be doing a Michael Myers perk tier list. Now, you've probably seen a few of these videos around YouTube or around the DVD community from creators like Deefer, Noob Free, uh, just anyone who's done these little tier list videos in general. And I decided, why don't I do a tier list but just for Michael Myers and what perks are good for him so that you can decide whether or not you want to use them on him or, like, well, yeah, that's just basically it. Um, and yeah, we're just going to be taking a look at what perks I think, as a Myers main with almost 1,000 hours, or mainly 900 or 800 hours of pure Myers, of just purely from playing Myers, 800 hours from just purely playing Myers on Dead by Daylight. I think I have the right to decide what perks are good on him and tell you what I think works well on him. And yeah, so we'll get right into it. So the first perk we're going to have a look at is Agitation. Now, Agitation in itself, it's situational, and it doesn't really fit into the meta. But for Michael Myers, it's good if you're going to be doing like a basement build. It's the only reason it's good. It also increases your speed by a certain percent. I think it's by 15%. I can't remember. I haven't got the figures here. But all I can say is that it increases your movement speed when you've got a survivor on you, when you're carrying a survivor, and yeah, it synergizes well with perks like Iron Grasp, which reduces the wiggle time by a certain percent, and it's good with Mad Grit as well. Basically, it's only good for basement builds. So for Michael Myers, I'll just be putting it into the D tier. Next, we've got Nurse's Calling. Now, Nurse's Calling is a really good one. At level 3, it lets you see survivors' auras up to a 24-meter range, I believe, when they're healing. So, and basically, when you're playing Michael, his terror radius is 16 meters in tier 2, and you can reduce that with the Dead Rabbit add-on and with Monitor and Abuse, and it's also 6 meters when in tier 1, and then when you're in tier 3, it's 32 meters. So Michael's low terror radius synergizes really well with Nurse's Calling, and it can help you get some easy hits while people are healing, but it doesn't really work well on survivors who like to heal near pallets in open areas because they'll see you coming from a mile away, and there's really not much benefit when they do that. But on maps like, say, Freddy's map, or like Larry's, or just any map that has a lot of obstacles that block line of sight, Nurse's Calling is going to work really well for you, so I'm going to be putting it in A tier. Next, we have Bamboozled. Now, Bamboozled is one of my personal favorites. I used to run it for quite some time, but then some other perks came in and they kind of changed up how I play Michael. But it used to be my main perk that I would always use for Michael. Now, at level 3, Bamboozle increases your vault speed, I believe, by 15%, and it blocks the vault location for 16 seconds at level 3. Just letting you all know, I don't have the figures with me right now. I'm just remembering what I know from all these perks, so correct me if I'm wrong down in the comments, but you know what I mean when I talk about these perks. So it's really good when you're in tier 3, because when you're in tier 3, I believe your vault speed is increased by 10%, so you naturally vault faster in tier 3, and if you smack Bamboozle on top of that, you're going to vault the window instantly. Some people might call that a bit overkill. I've heard a few people call Bamboozle on Myers a bit overkill, but I disagree. If you want to win, Bamboozle's a good perk to use, but keep in mind, it doesn't work on all maps. Like, say if you get two T walls next to each other, You can block one of the windows, but the survivor can just keep using the other one. But it will shorten your chase time down significantly. So yeah, you have a natural faster vault speed in tier 3, and you use Bamboozle, and you'll vault through windows instantly. So, and because I have my own personal bias for the perk, because I really like it, I reckon it also works well if you're playing Myers. So I'll be putting it in A tier. Next, we have Barbecue and Chili. Now, Barbecue and Chili is a meta perk. I use it all the time. I use it for the points that it gives you. I use it for the aura reading that it gives you. But mainly, it's just a good perk all around. It works on any killer, and it definitely works on Myers. So it works really well with your low terror radius because you hook a survivor, and then any survivors out of your out of that out of a 40-meter radius from the hooked survivor will be revealed to you for 4 seconds, and this is at level 3. So you have 4 seconds, or is it 3 seconds? I don't really remember. You have that amount of time of aura reading, so you can go straight to that survivor, and if they're working on a generator, you can easily just sneak up behind them. But most survivors, they're aware that most killers will be running Barbecue with Chili anyway, so they'll move one direction, and then when they time in their head that the aura reading's gone, then they'll move into another direction and throw you off. But I don't really get a lot of survivors that do that. But for the really the good survivors, the ones that have been playing the game for a long time, they like to do that a lot, where they'll move in one direction and kind of throw you off the scent. Yeah, you might not find them, but it's a really good perk for all killers, and it's a really good perk for Myers, so I'll be putting it in A tier. I mean, S tier, not A tier. Next, we've got Bloodhound. So Bloodhound is it's not a perk I really use. It's a good tracking perk if if you don't know how to track people. I mean, you can just stare at the ground all game and just follow the survivor's blood, but you should be able to read scratch marks, and you should be able to listen out for their grunts of pain. So I don't really consider this a really good perk on Myers. Yeah, you could probably run it with Sloppy Butcher if you wanted to do a tier 1 Myers game without Scratch Mirror. Just stay in tier 1 all game for whatever reason, and you can just smack someone and you just follow their blood. And that's pretty much the only application I can think of for Bloodhound. But yeah, it's really situational, and it doesn't really help Michael in any way other than if you're new to the game, or I guess if you're kind of bad at tracking, but tracking's pretty easy. So I'll be putting it in E tier. Next, we've got Beast of Prey. So Beast of Prey is a weird perk because it gives you extra blood points for, I think it's the hunting category, for chasing people. And it also removes your red stain when you get Bloodlust level 1. Now, the problem with that is that Michael already has a really dim red stain, because the red stain is... the intensity of the red stain is determined on how intense your terror radius is. So 32 meters, you'll have a full-on bright red stain, and then if you increase your terror radius beyond that with perks like Distressing, it gets progressively brighter. But with low terror radius killers like Myers, his red stain is relatively, I would say, very dim, but you can still see it. And because it requires you to get into a chase and chase the survivor for, I believe, 16 seconds until you get Bloodlust level 1, that just means you've wasted 16 seconds chasing someone. You should be trying to cut down chases as much as you can, pulling the big brain plays so you can try and get chases done quicker. You shouldn't be getting into a chase with Bloodlust 1 unless it's like there's a lot of loops nearby that you can't really do anything about. But if you've been chasing a survivor in an open area around a pallet that you can easily mind game, for 16 seconds, then there's something wrong. And Beast of Prey in itself isn't really a good perk on Myers anyway, so I'll be putting it in the E tier. Next, we have Brutal Strength at level 3. It increases the destruction speed of breaking pallets and kicking generators by 20% at level 3. And this is a really good perk if you want to be playing really aggressively. It synergizes well when Myers is in tier 3 because most survivors aren't going to risk looping a pellet more than once when you're in tier 3, so they're more than likely to chuck the pellet down straight away. So because of that, they will chuck the pellet down because they feel threatened. They're not safe because you got it insta-down, and they're not going to take the chance of you mind-gaming the pellet or going around for another loop. So they'll chuck it down straight away, and you'll get an easy pellet break, and you'll break it 20% faster. And that's one of the good things about when Michael's in tier 3, is that he can force pellets down. And Brutal Strength synergizes really well when Michael is in tier 3. And I also really like this perk. I used to run it for a long time. I don't really use it anymore unless it's like a special build. But yeah, I don't really use this perk much anymore. But it's still a great perk for Myers if you want to be aggressive and want to get rid of pallets faster, basically. So yeah, I'll be putting it in the B tier. Next, we have Blood Warden. Blood Warden is a very situational perk. If survivors don't want to fuck around when the generators are all done and just open the gate straight away, and they just don't want to fuck around, they'll just leave. They won't wait to unhook the guy on the hook. But if you do get survivors that are overly altruistic and will save the guy that you've put on the hook in endgame, then Blood Warden's actually going to be pretty good because you can easily get a stalk off if they try to go for the save, and then you can down another person, or you can get an easy 2 or 3 kills how many other survivors are left. And what Blood Warden does is that it blocks the exits for 60 seconds. Once the exit gate is open, that is the only requirement. An exit gate has to be open. You'll block the exit gates for 60 seconds once a survivor has been hooked when the exit gates are open. Now, this is really good if you have altruistic survivors, and if you can keep them in the game long enough to the point where the end game timer gets below 60 seconds or less, then just throw the guy on the hook, and then you've instantly cut them all, and they won't be able to get out because of Blood Warden. But all in all, Blood Warden, it's very situational. You wouldn't want to be running it unless it's for a special build. Like, it runs well with Tombstone. If you want to save up your Tombstone piece all game, and then you just hook the guy on the hook when the exit gates are open, they can't get out, and you get an easy Tombstone on the guy who's teabagging inside the exit gate, well then yeah, that's pretty funny, and it's fun. But other than that, Blood Warden is very situational. It's not really something you'd want to run on Myers all the time. It's a perk that relies on you being bad as a killer for it to work, because Myers is a pretty easy killer to kill all the survivors before all the gens get done, unless you get a map like Rotten Fields where there's a lot of corn, a lot of line of sight blockers, so you can't stalk. But other than that, I'll be putting Blood Warden in E tier. Next, we have Corrupt Intervention. Now, Corrupt Intervention is actually a very good perk on Michael Myers, because you have to get out of tier 1 as fast as you can, unless you're doing a special build for tier 1 Myers. But other than that, most of your games are going to be you trying to get out of tier 1 as fast as possible. Now, Corrupt Intervention is really good for that. What it does is that it blocks, I believe, the 3 or 4 or 5 of the furthest generators away from you. It just blocks the furthest generators from you at the start of the match, and then the 3 closest to you will be unblocked. I can't really remember. But anyway, it's a really good perk if you want to get out of tier 1 because it buys you that time that you need. So survivors don't get on the gens and start blitzing through them straight away. It synergizes really well with perks like Ron or other early game perks that can help you get out of tier 1 faster. And it's just a really good perk for Michael Myers because it just helps you get out of tier 1 basically. So I'll be putting it into B tier. Next we have Coulrophobia. Now Coulrophobia reduces healing speed of survivors in your terror radius by I believe 20 or 30%. I don't really use it that much. And because Myers has a really small terror radius to begin with, it doesn't really work well with him unless you're going to be using, say, the Fragrant Tuft of Hair plus the Dead Rabbit, so you'll have a 40-meter terror radius in tier 3. Then this perk would be pretty good, but even then, you're going to have insta-downs for the entire game anyway, and they're probably not going to heal unless they're stupid, because healing wastes time against an infinite tier 3 Myers, and in general, this perk doesn't really work well with him because it relies on the terror radius. So unless you're going to be running Distressing, which counters Michael's natural smaller terror radius, then that's the only way it's going to work. Coulrophobia isn't a good perk on Myers, and if you run Coulrophobia on Myers, I don't know what to say, but don't run it on Myers. It's really bad for Myers, and it doesn't work well with him. So I'll be putting it into F tier. Next, we have Dark Devotion. Now, Dark Devotion, it's a pretty alright perk. What it does is that when you hit your obsession, they emit a 32-meter terror radius for, I believe, 30 seconds or 20 seconds, and your terror radius is reduced to 0 for that duration of time, but your red stain isn't removed. That's the only thing. It doesn't remove your red stain, I think. I don't know. Someone's going to have to tell me down in the comments about that because I don't really know if it removes the red stain. But yeah, and you can use it every 30 seconds if you have it at level 3. So it's a pretty good perk for Myers if you like smacking your obsession all the time, and it's like Tinkerer, except you can use it whenever you want. Except I don't know if it removes red stain or not. It's good if you. It's just good for Myers in general. I reckon it's an alright perk for Myers, but it's situational because it requires you to smack your obsession. But if you find your obsession a lot, that's great. But some matches you're not going to find your obsession a lot, because it's situational. But the benefit of when it works, it's actually nice. It's pretty good. But other than that, I don't think it really works well, or it does work well with Myers, but it's a bit on it works well with Myers and it doesn't work well with Myers at the same time because it's not really a perk that you want to be running in your loadout all that often. But yeah, it's just a good perk. I like the perk, but I don't use it all that often. Do I think it's good on Myers? Yes and no. So I'll be putting it into C tier. Next we have Deerstalker. Now Deerstalker at level 3 lets you track down survivors within, I believe, a 32-meter range, or is it? No, it's 24-meter range. Or is it 28? I can't remember. Hold on. Okay, so I just checked, and it's 36 meters at level 3, so it lets you track down survivors at 36 meters, up to 36 meters at level 3. Now, Deerstalker is only good for slugging builds, or basically, if you want to get the most out of your tier 3, you can smack some guy down, go look for the other guy, and you'll still be able to track that other survivor that you downed before on the floor. It works really well with perks like Infectious Fright, so if you're going to be using the Dead Rabbit add-on on Myers, you can run Infectious Fright with it, and you can just down one survivor, you can see his aura on the ground with Deerstalker, and you go to the next survivor or survivors that were revealed to you with Infectious Fright. So it's a pretty good perk. I reckon it works well on Myers. But like I said, it's good for slugging builds if you're running a slugging build, or unless you've got a really big brain and you just know where survivors are all the time, you can just down one person and then just go to the next person. with your if you're in infinite tier 3. That's what I'm assuming. That's the only thing that this perk would be good for on Mars. If you're in tier 3, you down one survivor and you just go on to the rest. So yeah, do I think it's good on Mars? Yes. It's situational, and it works in only a few cases. But it's good for tracking down survivors if you aren't able to listen out for their grunts of pain for some reason after you down them. So I'll be putting it into D tier. Hex Devour Hope. Now, Hex Devour Hope, it's a bit of a tricky one because the benefits are enormous, but also your totem can also get broken pretty early in the game, making it practically useless. So the benefits of it is that for each token up to a maximum of 5 tokens, at 5 tokens you're able to kill survivors, you're able to moor them. At 3 tokens they get the exposed status effect, and for each individual token you gain a 5% haste status effect after hooking a survivor for an X amount of time. I can't remember how long, but this is all at level 3. It works well on infinite tier 1 Myers with Scratch Mirror, because you're able to see people, so you can easily get the easily hook people. Just smack them a few times and down them, and just hook them straight away, and just move back, and you can see who the guys unhooking. But for general gameplay, well, like I said before, your totem is probably going to get broken straight away, even really early in the game. But the payoff for it actually working is really good. It's a situational perk, and you won't be able to use it anymore if your totem gets broken. So it's good for Myers, and then it's not good for Myers. So I'll be putting it into C tier. Next, we have Discordance. Now, Discordance is a really good perk for the early game. If survivors all spawn next to each other, they'll just hop onto the same gen, and then you can get easy stalks off at the start. Because what this perk does, it reveals survivors, 2 or more survivors working on the same generator with a yellow aura. And you can basically just walk up to that gen. You can probably get an easy generator grab at the start of the game, or you can just easily tier up off of them, so you can get into tier 2 really early, and maybe into tier 3 if they're not paying attention. It's a good tracking perk for the early game to get you out of tier 1. So it is a very good perk for Myers, and that's why I'll be putting it into B tier. Next, we have Distressing. Now, Distressing is only good for Myers if you're running Infinite Tier 3. Other than that, its usage is practically extremely limited and almost useless. And since it negates your natural stealth ability, your natural terror radius of 16 meters in Tier 2 and 6 meters in Tier 1, it's not really a perk that you want to be running if you want to remain stealthy, because it completely destroys the whole point of playing Michael Myers, unless you're, like I said before, running an infinite tier 3 build. So I'll be putting it into E tier. Next, we have Michael's starting perk, Dynalite. Now, I really like Dynalite. It's one of the strongest, if not the strongest killer perk in the game. What it does is that when you moor your obsession, it slows all other survivors' actions down, like repair, healing, sabotage, just a lot of things by, I think, 28%. Hold on, I'm going to have a look. By 20, yeah, it was 25%. It reduces all those, what I just mentioned, by 25%. So repair, healing, and sabotage, and all that other stuff. So it's a good perk if you want to slow the game down, but the only problem with this perk is that you have to kill your obsession. That is literally the only prerequisite for this perk to work. And if your obsession is actually paying attention and realizes they got Dynalite, they're probably going to hide the entire game, so you probably will never get it to work. And the easiest way to get this perk to work is if you're using an Ivory Mori or Ebony Mori. So you hook the obsession once, they get unhooked, and then you just down them, and you can mori them. But it also works even better if you're using the tombstone piece, because that's even faster than hooking them. But both those ends are very situational. The tombstone piece could take longer to use to kill the obsession, because you might not be able to get a lot of stalk off from the survivors during that match. And also, if you're trying to hook them with a mori, they might just hide the entire match. So you probably will never even get the perk to work, and then probably by the time you get the perk to work, it'll probably be 5 generators done anyway. But at the off chance that you do get the perk to work at, say, really early game, like 5 to 4 generators left, then it's really, really strong perk, and that's why I say it's one of the best perks in the game. So do I think it's a good perk on Myers? I do think it's a good perk on Myers, because Myers can utilize the tombstone piece to easily kill the obsession. But as I said, it's situational, and it doesn't always work. It's what I used to use before I used to have Ron, and I can tell you right now, I really love this perk, but I don't use it much anymore. So I'll be putting it into D tier. Next, we have Enduring. Now, Enduring is a good perk for Myers if you want to force pallets down. Now, it gives you a stun. You recover from stuns, I believe, 75% faster at level 3. So if you get a pallet thrown on you, you'll pretty much recover instantly, and this perk works really well with Spirit Fury. Now, it's good if you want to force pallets down in tier 3, but you probably think that you can still hit the survivor as they're trying to make it to the pallet. And if you do miss and they do chuck the pallet on you, you'll recover straight away and it'll be fine. But it was a good shot. It was a good idea to try and lunge at the survivor going for the pallet, because you probably would have hit them anyway. But because you didn't, you'll still be able to keep up the chase if you're able to mind game the pallet. But if not, you can just break the pallet straight away because you've recovered straight away. So I think it's a really good perk for Myers, and I'll be putting it into A tier. Next, we have Franklin's Demise. Now, Franklin's Demise is a situational perk. I only use it against Swifts. If you've seen one of my Swift Destroyer videos, one of my earlier videos on this channel, where I go up against Swifts, I would use Franklin's Demise because I would see a lot of items in the lobby, and I don't like items in my lobby. Now, as for its application for Michael Myers, it's situational. So if you're getting a lot of survivors in your lobby that have a lot of items, then use the perk. But for Michael Myers in general, does it synergize with him? No, because it's basically useless if you look at it from a power perspective. How does this help Michael's power in any way? It does not. So I'll be putting it into F tier. Oh, next we got Fire Up, the most overpowered perk in the game, behind Dying Light. Basically, what this perk does, for each generator that gets completed, you gain a token, and each token grants you a speed bonus, a certain percentage of the speed bonus to breaking pallets, picking up survivors, dropping survivors, hooking survivors, going through windows, and kicking generators. And at 5 tokens, it gives you a 20% speed boost to all those actions. Now, this perk's pretty good if you want to be doing like Vault Mastermize, or if you want to do like what I did in my previous video, Pallet Eater, so you can break pallets pretty much instantly when all generators are done. You use it with Brutal Strength and Bamboozle. But other than that, the perk relies on you being bad. It requires the generators to be done, which is a survivor objective for them to escape. And you have to rely on the survivors to complete their objectives. That's why this perk is really bad. Does it synergize with Myers' power? Yeah, it works really well with Myers' power, because you have the natural 10% vault speed at tier 3, and at 5 tokens this gives you a 30% faster vault in tier 3, but only when all 5 generators are done. And it also gives you a bonus to a lot of other things. So, because it's situational, you rely on the survivors to finish the gens, and it only plays with uh, the aspect of Michael's natural faster vaulting speed at tier 3. It's not really a good perk. So, unless you're running a specialized build, so I'll be putting it into D tier. Next, we've got Hex Haunted Ground. Now, this is a perk I was using a lot when it was released with the Spirit expansion, and it's a overall good perk. I use it on my Burger King Mize build, so I can get easy one shots if a survivor decides to go around breaking totems. Basically, what this perk does is that when a survivor breaks your Haunted Ground totem and 2 of them spawn, uh, all survivors will get the exposed status effect for 60 seconds, and the other totem that wasn't broken just goes to being a dull totem. And it's really good if you'll be going to be in tier 1, because if they break the totem straight away at the start of the match and you're still in tier 1, you can easily get a one shot right at the start of the match because you're able to sneak up behind someone. But the problem with this perk is that sometimes survivors aren't going to break all the totems if they think that you have this perk, and also because once the perk timer has expired, you won't be able to use it ever again. So it's a one-time perk. So once it's gone, you're only going to have 3 perks that you're going to be able to use for the rest of the game. It has really good early game potential. It can help you get those easy snipes with your extremely small tower radius if you're running it with Monitor and Abuse, so you have a 0-meter tower radius in tier 1. But other than that, it doesn't really give you much benefit. So I'll be putting it into C tier. Next, we have Bitter Murmur. Now, Bitter Murmur reveals survivors' auras next to completed generators for, I believe, 4 or 5 seconds. And yeah, that's basically all it does. And then once all generators are completed, all survivors are revealed to you for, I believe, 8 or 10 seconds. I can't really remember. And yeah, this is another perk that relies on survivors' objectives being completed. Because it only has such a small time frame, and it only works if a survivor is next to the completed generator, the survivors have to be next to the generator that was completed. There isn't really much use for it. It's good if you're going to be running the also Burger King Mize build, but other than that, it doesn't really work well with Mize. Well, it does work well with Mize, but it doesn't at the same time. It's good in tier 1 or 2, so if you're having trouble finding survivors after a gen got completed, when you go to check out the location, they might be hiding around the completed generator because they think you're nearby, or you just can't find them, or they've run in a certain direction and you couldn't find them without any normal means, then this is a good perk. So I'll be putting it into C tier. Next, we got Huntress Lullaby. Now, Huntress Lullaby, for each token, I believe up to a maximum of 6 or 5 tokens. Each token will give the survivors it decreases time or increases the time between the skill check warning and the actual skill check, or it decreases the time. It's one of those two. And then at 5 tokens, survivors won't get skill check warnings. This is only for generators. And basically how you get the token is that you have to hook the survivors. Now, this perk doesn't... this perk is a good perk if you can get it to work, but survivors will be automatically revealed... Have it revealed to them at the start of the match. As soon as they touch a generator, they'll get the notification that you have Hex Huntress Lullaby. But it doesn't really synergize with Michael's power. But all in all, it's a good perk if you can get it to work. Other than that, it doesn't synergize well with Michael's power, so I'll be putting it into D tier. Next, we have Hangman's Trick. Now, basically, the only thing that Hangman's Trick does is that it regenerates your hooks faster. At level 3, I believe broken hooks regenerate in 20 seconds if they've been sabotaged. And also, if you hook a survivor that's on death hook, the hook will also regenerate. If you weren't running the perk, that hook would not regenerate because a survivor died on it, because, well, that's how the game works. So all this perk does, it's only good if you have a Swift in your lobby who have all toolboxes and you think they're just going to sabotage all your hooks. Well, then that's the only use for it. But it's pretty much useless. That's all I can say. Does it work with Michael Myers' power? No, it doesn't. So it's gone immediately into F tier. Next, we have Infectious Right. Now, Infectious Right is one of my favorite perks on Michael Myers. I can't express how much I love this perk. Basically, any survivors within your terror radius, after you down the survivor, they will yell and reveal their location for, I believe, 4 or 5 seconds. And it's only a notification. It's not aura read, it's a notification. And that information alone is extremely good because this perk works extremely well with Michael's tier 3 ability. Because you can down one survivor, and since your terror radius is automatically put to 32 meters in tier 3, you down the survivor, and then you'll be able to see all the other survivors around you with your 32 meter terror radius. And then you can just move on to that survivor, hit him, and you can just chain everyone down until everyone's all downed. And you'd be surprised how well this perk works on Michael. It is absolutely amazing. It works really well with Monitor and Abuse and the Dead Rabbit add-on, because they both increase your terror radius in tier 3. Well, the Dead Rabbit increases your terror radius in tier 3, and then Monitor and Abuse increases your terror radius when in a chase, and you're going to be in a chase anyway. So you're going to have an absolutely massive terror radius, and then you can use Infectious Right with that to capitalize on that, so you can find survivors all the way across the map. It's ridiculous. This perk is amazing on Michael Myers. I love it, and that's why it's going immediately into S tier. Some of you might disagree with that, but that's where I think it belongs. Next, we have Iron Grasp. Now, I was talking about this earlier with Agitation. Iron Grasp is only good if you're doing a basement build, or if you get all the pesky survivors that like to block a lot, so you can just smack them on the head until they piss off. That's pretty much the only use for it, the only application for it that I can think of. Does it synergize with Michael's power? No, it doesn't. But it's an okay perk in certain situations, but it's not something that you probably run in your on your roster. So I'll be putting it into E2. Actually, yeah, I'll leave it in E2. Next, we've got Iron Maiden. Now, the only use for Iron Maiden I can think of is if you're running Scratch Mirror Myers on Larry's or the game. So basically, what Iron Maiden does is that it relies on survivors hiding in lockers, and then once they do hide and get out of the locker that they've originally hid in, they'll get the exposed effect for, I believe, 16 seconds, something like that. They just get exposed for a certain amount of time. And you open lockers, I believe 50% faster, something like that. And basically, it's only good on tier 1 Myers with Scratch Mirror or Vanity Mirror for tier 2 Myers. Because the survivors will try to use the lockers to hide from your aura reading ability with those add-ons, and then you can just quickly run back over to them if they get out of the lock, and you can easily insta down them, provided that they aren't all the way across the map. But it's situational, only works with those builds and only in certain situations. But it works well. It works well nonetheless. But I wouldn't run it all the time because it doesn't fit into the roster. So I'll be putting it into E2. Next, we have Insidious, which is only good for Leatherface, but we're not talking about him here. Since Michael Myers already has a natural built-in lower terror radius, Insidious is absolutely useless. And fun fact, when I was still learning this game, I actually used to run Insidious on Mize for some reason because I was really stupid back then, and I used to run Insidious on Mize when I was in the basement. I'd run it with Monitor in Abuse because I used to basement camp back then because I was really bad at the game. This was when I first started, and I used to run this with Monitor in Abuse. And if all I can say is that I was dumb. And anyway, this perk, what it does is that it reduces your terror radius after you stood still for like 2 or 3 seconds. And yeah, reduces your terror radius to 0, which is basically pointless on Michael Myers because you can just move around the whole map and no one will heal your terror radius anyway. So standing still is not an option for Michael Myers. So this perk is absolutely garbage. The only use I can see for it is if you're running Infinite Tier 3 and you want to be toxic as F and basement camp the survivor, because the other survivors will think that you probably went away because they know that you've got a big terror radius anyway. So it's going immediately into F tier. Next we have Knockout. Now Knockout works really well on Myers because you can down someone with tier 3 and then you can just move on to find someone else, knowing that the other survivors aren't going to find the down survivor so quickly. So basically what it does, it reduces survivors won't be able to see down survivors unless they're in a 16-meter range. So it's good if you want to use it with Infectious Fright. It's really good if you use it with Infectious Fright. The Knockout and Infectious Fright synergize really well, and Knockout synergizes really well with Michael Myers' tier 3 ability. So I'll be putting it into B tier. Next, we have Shadowborn. Now, Shadowborn increases your field of view by, I believe, 15 degrees, or moderately increases your field of view, whatever it says now. And that's literally all it does. It just increases your field of view. So if it's good because you can get stalks within a wider view radius, so you can see what's more on your screen. That's basically all this perk does. You just see more of what is on in the game on your screen because your field of view has been increased. It's only good if you're stalking, so you can see people at the corners of your screen more because of your field of view. It works all right with Myers, but I don't personally use it. Uh, but yeah, that's pretty much all it does. So it'll be going into D tier. Next, we have Monitor and Abuse. Now, Monitor and Abuse is one of the best perks for Michael Myers because you're already taking advantage of Michael's lower terror radius or natural terror radius, and slapping Monitor and Abuse on that in Tier 1. If you use Monitor and Abuse, your terror radius will be 0 when not in a chase. If you use it on Tier 2, your terror radius will be, what is it? Your terror radius will be 8 meters when not in a chase in Tier 2. And then when in Tier 3, it will reduce it by 22. It'll be 22 meters in, wait, 22? No. Sorry guys, I'm not good with numbers, but you get what I mean. It reduces your terror radius across the board for all of Michael's tier states, and it increases it it increases it when you're in a chase by 8 meters. So it's a great perk for Michael Myers. It's one of the best perks for Michael Myers. It's amazing, and it works really well with Infectious Fright, so you can get those easy downs in tier 3 and you can move on to the other people because you're going to be in a chase, and Monitor and Abuse will increase your terror radius by 8 when in a chase. So you're going to have a big terror radius in tier 3 if you use Monitor and Abuse on Michael. So if you don't use Monitor and Abuse on Michael, I'm sorry, but you're doing it wrong. So that's why it's immediately going into S tier. Next, we have Mad Grit. Now, Mad Grit, basically, when you hit a survivor, when you're carrying a survivor on your shoulder, that survivor's wiggle timer will be paused for 2 or 3 seconds depending on the level. I think at level 3 it pauses it for 3 seconds. And missed attacks have like a really fast cooldown, so you can basically just spam the hit button, the M1 button, and if you miss, well, you'll have instant recovery. It's only good on a basement build. It only works well with Agitation and Iron Grasp, and if you're doing a basement build. So it has nothing to do with Michael's power whatsoever, and it does not help him in any way unless in certain situations, which is why it's going into E tier. Next we have Monsterous Strong, another basement perk that is absolutely useless and does not help Mize in any way unless you're doing a basement build. And the benefits of it aren't really that good anyway, because once the survivor's in the basement and you're doing a basement build, they're not going to get out anyway unless you're bad. All this does is just increases their sacrifice speed, which you don't really need. You have all the time in the world once you have 2 survivors in the basement. So that's why it will also be going into E tier. Next we have Make Your Choice. Now Make Your Choice is one of my favorites for tier 1 Mize, because when you hook a survivor, you have to be out of a 32 meter range for this perk to work. Now, when a survivor unhooks a survivor, when you're out of the 32 meter radius, the survivor who unhooked will be exposed for 60 seconds. Now, this is really good on Scratch Mirror Mize, because if you sit just inside the 32 meter range, you can see who's unhooking, and as soon as they start to unhook, you move out of the 32 meter radius, and then that person will get exposed, and you've seen who that person was, and then you can easily go and down them. Now, that's probably the only good thing it's good for, is for tier 1 Mize. It does work well if you know what you're doing, like if you're able to find the survivor who got exposed in any of the tiers, like tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. But other than that, I can't think of any other use, but it's still a good perk, so it will be going into C tier. Next we have Hex N Escape Staff. Now, this is what I think. It's only good on tier 1 Mize. I only use it as insurance if everything goes to shit, in case I get good survivors, because I don't like getting good survivors when I do spooky Mize, because I just want to scare people. I don't intend to win, but I just get those survivors that just want to be assholes, and they just want to complete all the gens, which is not fun for me, and I don't get to make any content out of it. That's the only reason I use No One Escape Staff. But does it apply to Michael's power? In a sense. It rewards the player for being bad. That's all I can say. If you use Hex No One Escape Staff on Mize, and you call yourself a Michael main, the only time I can see this perk being allowed to be used is if you're doing Burger King Mize or if you're doing Spooky Mize. It's literally the only time I actually think this perk should ever be used, and I don't think it should be used on any other killer other than No Blink Nurse or maybe Wraith. But other than that, it's for players who are bad at the game, unless you're doing any of those specialized builds I just mentioned, which make you really bad at the game anyway, because it limits your power drastically. But yeah, other than that, it's going into F tier because it's a trash perk and it's for bad players, and it only works on specialized builds. Next we have Overcharged. Now Overcharged is an alright perk. Basically when you kick a generator, any survivor who interacts with it will get a skill check, and if they fail the skill check, the generator is regressed by 5% at level 3, and if they succeed the skill check, they won't get a generator explosion. Now this is good if you are chasing survivors off generators, and then you just kick it, and then you just get back into the chase. But other than that, it's not really that good, since once survivors know you have Overcharge anyway, they can just easily complete the skill check. It's not a hard skill check. It's a pretty easy skill check, even though it says considerably difficult on the title card for the perk. But yeah, it's not really that good unless you're running it with Brutal Strength. Does it help Michael's power in any way? No. It's a perk that works only on bad survivors, but it works well with Huntress Lullaby, so I'll be putting it into D tier. Next, we have Overwhelming Presence. Now, basically, what Overwhelming Presence does is that it reduces, increases item consumption from survivors when they're in your tear radius. And since Michael's tear radius is really small, because it's his natural tear radius is small, you don't really get a lot of benefit out of this perk unless you're running infinite tier 3 Myers with the Dead Rabbit and Distressing. So after saying that, it's basically the same as Coulrophobia. The function remains the same and the requirements remain the same, so it's going into F tier. Next, we have Pop Goes the Weasel. Now, Pop Goes the Weasel works really well on tier Myers, especially when you hit tier 3, you down someone, and you just hook them and then quickly run over to a gen as soon as you can. Although Michael doesn't have the mobility of the nurse or Billy, I still think it's a really good perk for him because he has insta-downs when he hits tier 3. So you can use it to slow down the game by playing really aggressive. And each time you kick the generator, I believe it regresses it by 15% when it's level 3, or it's 10%. Still a big number, really big number. Yeah, and you can take advantage of the perk when you synergize it with Michael's tier 3 ability. So I'll be putting it into B tier. Next, we have Predator, which is one of the worst perks in the game. Or it's a decent perk, but it doesn't really help Myers all that much. It's a tracking perk. What it does is that scratch marks will spawn closer together, so you won't be able to get thrown off of chases so easily. You're able to follow the scratch marks a little bit easier. But the problem with it is, if a survivor's across the map and they're running, and you have a pretty open direct line of sight with them, the scratch marks aren't going to go all over trees and like other tall objects like that, because the scratch marks will be spread out. So you'll be able to see the scratch marks from across the map. But if you're using Predator, you won't be able to see the scratch marks because they're going to be really tightly packed together. So you probably won't be able to have that cross map view of the scratch marks and won't know if there's a survivor there or not. It's only good if you're in a chase, like if you're right on the survivor's ass and they're really good at juking you. So I view this as a perk that's only good for if you're really bad at chasing and tracking. And it does not help Myers' power in any way, shape, or form. So I'll be putting it into F tier. Next, we have Ploy for Feud. This is another one of Michael's perks. Basically, what it does, if you leave your obsession when you're in a chase with your obsession, you'll gain a token. Each token grants a 5% speed bonus at level 3. And it's really good for the Infinite Tombstone build because Judith's Tombstone reduces your speed moderately, and this perk makes up for the speed reduction by increasing your speed. And if you kill your obsession, you'll still retain all the tokens because you only lose a token when you perform an attack action, like a swing. Swinging at survivors is the only way you lose tokens, and since tombstoning survivors doesn't count as an attack action, you won't lose your tokens. So that's the only thing I see this perk is good for. It'd be good on Burger King Myers as well, but the whole point of Burger King Myers is to make yourself as slow as possible. But yeah, it's a good perk only for the Infinite Tombstone build. But yeah, it's a great perk for Myers, I reckon. It's a nice perk that Myers got when he was released. But other than that, it doesn't really help him all that much unless you're running Infinite Tombstone, so I'll be putting it into D tier. Next, we have Randcore. Now, Randcore is basically the same as Bitter Murmur, except you don't get aura reads, you get notifications, and at the end of the game, if your obsession is still alive, you can mori them. They get the exposed status effect, and you can mori them. I don't really use Randcore. It doesn't really. It's a nice tracking perk. I reckon it's better than Bitter Murmur, even though you don't get aura reading like Bitter Murmur gives you. But if you have an obsession at the end of the game, or if you're using obsession perks like, I don't know, Remember Me, or Save the Best for Last, and you've left your obsession the entire game, then this is an alright perk, but it doesn't really help Michael Myers and his power. It's a good tracking perk, but other than that, it's not really that good. I don't really use it all that much, so I'll be putting it into D tier. Next, we have Remember Me. Now, I'd like to quickly say Remember Me got nerfed during the last patch. It is no longer 30 seconds stackable bonus. Well, it's not a stackable bonus. What it used to be before is that if you get all the tokens on Remember Me by hitting your obsession, I believe it was 5 times, you'd get... Survivors would get... they would have to open the exit gate even longer. 30 seconds will be added to the exit gate opening timer, so it'd take forever for them to open the gate. But it recently got nerfed, so when you have all the tokens now at level 3, only add 16 seconds, 16 extra seconds to open exit gate. And basically this is a perk that rewards you for being bad. It's an endgame perk. It works well with Tombstone if you want to save your Tombstone for the entire game, but other than that, I don't really use this perk all that much. It doesn't really help Michael's power. It's a tunneling obsession perk. That's all it is. So I'll be putting it into E tier. Next, we have Hex Ron. And we all know what I'm going to say about this one. It is a great perk. It is an amazing perk. It is one of the best perks in the game for all killers because of how well it slows down the game unless the totem has been broken. Now, basically at level 3, what this perk does, survivors have to hit great skill checks to progress through the generators, and if they hit good skill checks, they get a regression on their generator by, I believe, 5% or 1%, something like that. So they have to try and hit great skill checks, and not a lot of survivors are really good at hitting great skill checks, but there are some gods out there who just hit great skill checks all the time and don't miss one. And yeah, it's great for slowing the game down a lot. It's great for getting you out of tier 1 as fast as possible because you'll give you that time. It works really well with Corrupt Intervention, by the way. And all in all, it's a great perk for Michael Myers because it just gives him that time he needs to tier up. And in some cases, you might even have it going for the entire game if it doesn't get broken. So it's going into S tier. Next, we have Sloppy Butcher. Now, Sloppy Butcher is great on Michael, I reckon, because since you have a low terror radius, you're going to be able to sneak up on a lot of people, so you're going to get a lot of hits off. And basically what Sloppy Butcher is, it gives survivors a mangled effect, so it takes longer for them to heal, and they bleed more frequently, so it works well with Bloodhound, but like I said with Bloodhound before, it's not really useful on Myers, and it's a bad tracking perk to begin with. But all in all, Sloppy Butcher, I highly recommend on Myers, because you can get those hits off because you use low terror radius, and it takes longer for survivors to heal. So I'll be putting it into A tier. Next we have Spirit Fury. Now Spirit Fury, when you break, I believe, 3 pallets, or 2 pallets. When you break 2 pallets at level 3, the next pallet that gets dropped on you will be broken instantly, but you'll still suffer from the stun effect. Now, this is a good perk if you run it with Enduring. It's good if you want to be really aggressive in Myers, mainly because when you run it with Enduring, when the pallet gets dropped on you, it'll break instantly and you'll still be able to keep up the chase. It's good when you're in tier 3 and when you want to force pallets down on you. So you can take advantage of your extended lunge, and then if a survivor's about to make it to the pallet, you just lunge towards the pallet and they'll just chuck it on you anyway, because they're always going to chuck the pallet down on you when you're in tier 3, because they're not going to take that chance of going around for another loot, because they know that they're going to get hit and get downed and then get thrown on the hook. So you can keep up the chase, and that's why Spirit Fury is a great perk on Myers, because it helps you force down pallets. So I'll be putting it into A tier. Next, we have Spies from the Shadows. Now, Spies from the Shadows, what it does is that you get a 100% chance of crows giving it a notification if a survivor disturbs a crow. Uh, and I believe that's when in a 48-meter range or something like that. It works really well on Larry's. It works really well on maps that have a lot of crows, but since most maps have their crows all on the outside edges of the map anyway, it's not really that good of a perk. Only good on Larry's. It is only good on Larry's. Um, I can't really think of any special builds you can run it with. Maybe if you're doing infinite tier 3 on Mines on Larry's. I used to do this with this perk before they gave it a cooldown. I don't know why they gave it a cooldown, but they did. And now it's not as really as good, but it's still good on Larry's. But yeah, that's the only thing I can think it's good for Mines if you're running tier 3 infinite on Larry's. So I'll be putting it into E tier. Next we have Lightborn. Now, Lightborn, what it does is that it makes it harder for survivors to blind you with flashlights. I believe it's wait, hold on, I'll have to go check. Okay, so it gives you a resistant increases your resistance to blindness by 80% at level 3, and you recover from blindness stuns 50% faster. So this is good if you're breaking a lot of pallets. It works well with brutal strength, I'd say. I reckon. Um, but it's only good if you're getting flashlight stunned all the time. It's only good against swifts or if you've got survivors in your lobby that have a lot of flashlights. Other than that, it doesn't really help Mai's power in any way. So I'll be putting it into E tier. Next, we have Mai's final perk that he starts with, and that's Save the Best for Last. Now, with each token of Save the Best for Last, it gives you a successful attack cooldown of 5%, up to 8 tokens. So you're going to have a massive weapon cooldown if you get all 8 tokens. You're basically going to bring back the machine gun build, except it's a little bit watered down. This with 8 tokens of Save the Best Last, you're not as fast as the machine gun build anyway, but it's still pretty fast. Um, I reckon it works well on Myers. Basically, the only downside to this perk is that if you hit your obsession, you lose 2 tokens at level 3, which is pretty bad, but it's a great perk, I reckon. It works well with a number of builds if you want to just chain survivors down, just if you're smacking them all the time. It works well with mines because of its low attack radius, so you can get those hits. But other than that, it's an okay perk. It's decent, so I'll be putting it into C tier. Next, we have Strider. So, in case you're deaf and you don't play at 100% volume like me, then Strider's the perk for you. Now, Strider increases the sounds of the grunts of pain by survivors by a considerable number. So you'll be able to hear them. It's just extremely loud. It's so loud that you will probably never be able to lose a survivor if you're running this perk when they're injured. And if you do manage to lose them, well, I don't know how you did, but uh, it's just you shouldn't be able to lose survivors with Strider. Uh, does it work well with Miser's power? Well, I guess if you're running Monitor and Abuse and a very low terror radius with Dead Rabbit, yeah, it's okay because then you can lose a survivor and then they'll go to heal and you can still heal them from like half the map away, a quarter of the map away with Strider when they're injured. But it's only good if you're losing chasers a lot. If you can't listen out for their grunts of pain to figure out if they're trying to juke you or mind game you at the pallet, and then you can just go back around because you can hear them with Strider. And yeah, that's pretty much all I can think of is the only good thing for Strider for Michael Myers. So I'll be putting it into E tier. Next, we have Surveillance. Now, Surveillance is a good perk. Basically, when you kick a generator, that generator will have an aura on it, and until a survivor interacts with it, the color of the aura will change to yellow, and you'll know if survivors working on it. And you can also hear survivors working on generators from further away. So it's a good perk if you have a low terror rate. You kick the generator, you move, you go somewhere else, and then they start working on the generator again, and you'll know because the aura of the generator will turn yellow, and then you can go back to the generator and easily sneak up on those survivors who are working on it. That's why surveillance is a good perk on mine, so I'll be putting it into B tier. Next, we have Thanatophobia. Now, Thanatophobia's it basically reduces repair speed, healing speed, and a number of other things for survivors when they're affected by it. So you get the maximum benefit out of it when you hit 4 survivors, and I believe it gives you a 28% or 27%, 26% negative bonus on survivors to repair and healing and all that other stuff. It's great on Myers because, like I keep saying over and over again, it's because of its natural built-in terror radius. Because it is small, and you can sneak up on the survivors, and you can just smack them. And you can get easy smacks for your Thanatophobia stacks on all the survivors, and it'll reduce their repair and healing speed, among other things. So that's why it works well with Ron, and it works well with Dynalite as well. But yeah, other than that, it works well on Myers, I reckon. So I'll be putting it into C tier. Next, we have Tinkerer. Now, Tinkerer isn't really a perk that works with Myers' power all that well. Basically, it reduces your terror radius to 0 for, I believe, 6 or 8 seconds, and you get a notification when a generator is, I believe, 85% completed. Yeah. It's only good if you're running infinite tier 3 Myers if you're going to have a massive terror radius so you can sneak up on the survivor and scare the shit out of them. But because Myers already has a really small terror radius anyway, there's not really much of a point to run Tinkerer on him. So it'll be going into E tier. Actually, it can go into D tier. Next, we have Territorial Imperative, another useless basement perk. Basically, what it does is that if you're running basement build, you'll be able to see survivors who enter the basement and when you're 32 meters away, and you'll have an aura read on them for 4 seconds, I think, or something, or 5 or 6 seconds. And yeah, that's literally the only use for it. It's for basement builds. So it is immediately going into F tier. Yeah, I think that's where it belongs. Next, we have Hex Thrill of the Hunt. Now, what this perk does is that when a survivor touches any of your totems, you gain a notification, and depending on how many totems you have, they get a reduced speed debuff to breaking totems, so it takes them longer for them to break. This is good if you want to protect your ruin, or if you want to use Devour Hope on, say, tier 1 Myers. But it's not really a perk I run all that well. It's not a perk that I use all that much, I mean, for Myers. It doesn't help his power in any way. The perk is only to defend your totems. You can also use it by itself as a decoy. Like, not a lot of survivors will suspect that you're just using the one Hex Thrill the Hunt totem and no other totems. So it's good as a decoy if you want to waste survivors' time. They'll just keep running back to it and you can get those easy smacks. But yeah, other than that, it's just going to go into D tier. Next, we have Hex the Third Seal. Now, what Hex the Third Seal does is that when you hit a survivor, they get the blindness status effect, and they won't be able to see the auras of down survivors being hooked, etc., etc., and it counters every survivor aura reading perk in the game while the totem is up. So it's really good if you're running tier 1 Myers. It's good for any tier of Myers. It's a great perk. It's an amazing perk. It can help you in some really sticky situations if survivors keep going for the people you've downed. It's good for slugging builds, and it's good all in all to reduce the information gathering of the survivors as a whole. So I think it's a great perk on Myers. It helps Myers move around the map better because survivors won't know where each other are, and if a survivor has a perk that helps them track the killer, like Object of Obsession, they won't be able to see Myers with it. So that's why I'll be putting it into C tier. Next we have this perk. We have Unrelenting. Once a great perk in its prime, it used to increase your successful attack cooldown. Now it only increases your missed attack cooldown by, I believe, 20%, or was it 30%? Something like that. It is useless. It does not help you. If you hit your shots a lot, then there's no point in using it. It's good if you're starting out as Myers. If you're new to the game, I know I used it when I was new to the game, but other than that, it doesn't really have any use to any experienced player, so it's going immediately into F tier. Next, we have Unnerving Presence. Now, this perk is also useless on Myers because it relies on having a massive terror radius, and Michael Myers just simply does not have a big terror radius. It is only good if you're running Infinite Tier 3 Myers with Dead Rabbit and Distressing. Now, what it does is that whenever survivors get a skill check, the skill check will be significantly smaller, so they will probably miss skill checks more often unless they're good at getting skill checks, and they're not going to miss any at all. So that's why I'm putting it into E tier. Next, we have Whispers. Now, Whispers is undeniably one of the best perks in the game, one of the greatest perks in the game. It's a great tracking perk. What it does is that when you're in, when you're in a 32-meter radius of a survivor, you'll get the perk will light up and let you know that you're in a 32-meter radius as a survivor, so you can find survivors more easily. Now, I don't actually use this perk, but I know it's a good perk. It is a great perk. It will help you find survivors, and it's one of the best tracking perks in the game. But I don't use it, mainly because I find the hurdy-dur-dur-dur-burr noises quite distracting and annoying, so I prefer to use any other tracking perk. But it's good for Myers because you have the smaller terror radius, and you'll be able to try and look for the survivor that's in your within a 32-meter range, because you know there's a survivor in a 32-meter range, and yeah, it'll help you find that survivor. So I'll be putting it into B tier. Okay, so that is the conclusion of the Michael Myers perk tier list. You might agree with some of these statements, you might disagree with some of these statements. Like I said at the start of this video, I have almost 800 hours of just pure Michael Myers gameplay. Of just only playing Michael Myers. When I first started playing Dead by Daylight, I only played Michael Myers. I never played anything else because Michael Myers was he's just epic. Okay, Michael Myers is just amazing. But yeah, just take what I've put here with a grain of salt. And some of these perks are just my own personal preference. Like, say, I know Dynalite is the strongest killer perk in the game, but it's situational. You don't always get it to work. Some people might even disagree with me putting Infectious right up here because they probably don't use it on their Myers all that much, but I know the potential it has for Michael if you're using it with perks like Knockout, and you use the Dead Rabbit add-on, and you use Monitor and Abuse and Ruin, then nothing can stop you. Some people might disagree that I've put, I don't know, say, maybe Bitter Murmur in C tier and might put it into B tier. Some people might disagree that I've put, I don't know, Remember Me in E tier. You know, some people might even disagree that I put Noed in F tier because Noed gives you exposed that when all generators are done. But this is all what I think works for Myers, so you're just going to have to, like I said, take it with a grain of salt. So I'll be wrapping up the video here. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to subscribe. It helps me to help you to put out more videos, and be sure to hit the bell button so you never miss out my amazing content. I'm Jumpscare Myers, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a good one.